everyone. Welcome to this freeform episode of the Mindful in Minutes podcast. So, we are expanding upon what I've called the friendship series, where I basically get to chat with my amazing friends who are either in like the woo woo space or the mindfulness space, or I don't know, just the really incredible women that I have in my life. And this month we are talking to my friend, my former colleague, a fellow solopreneur, Ariana Roque. And Ariana is the founder and CEO of Eddie Skin. She's a South Florida native. She is 28 years young, although I think you might be 29 when this episode releases, because I know you are a beautiful Virgo baby. And you may also know her for her work as a model and even showing up on the Yoga for You Instagram feed as a former Team Yoga for You member. But on a personal note, Ariana is truly one of the most pure and kind people that you will ever meet in life. And I am so thrilled to have you on Mindful in Minutes. Ariana, hi.
Hi, thank you for having me on. That was a beautiful intro. And I was thinking, as you were saying, you forgot to mention the most important thing is that you took me to my first Taylor Swift concert.
I thought you were going to say that you forgot to mention that I am a longtime Mindful Minutes listener, that before we
Yes,
even knew each other, that you
that
were a longtime
too.
listener. But yeah, I think the Taylor Swift concert too is also like, up there, most important things we've done.
One of the most amazing experiences of my life. And I'm so happy I got to do it with you.
Oh, that's so sweet. We something that I try to do just for listeners is I try to do yoga for you team building. So usually if someone's been on the team for like by the time it's been a yearish, I try to do something fun and unique, whether it's like maybe send like an anniversary gift to people, or maybe it's doing a fun activity. And when Ariana was helping me so much behind the scenes when I was pregnant with Poppy, and even, before that, when just Pork Chop was in the picture, we did team building at the Eras Tour here in Minneapolis. And I was so pregnant. It was like the middle of the summer. I remember like waddling up those like stadium steps, and just that was a long time for me to be on my feet. I had a great time. And then, okay, before we get into the thick of it, should we tell everyone what happened after? I will I will never forget the emotional support that you gave me, Ariana. We went to the Eras tour. For any Swifties listening out there, we were there the infamous night in which our surprise song was Dear John, which was just like
Yes.
a whole thing because she hadn't played it in forever. And also my friend Kendra was there as well. And I don't live too far from the city, but we knew traffic was going to be bad. So we're like, okay, we're just going to get a hotel nearby and we'll kind of make a whole like girls' night of it. I've already set the scene that I'm like so pregnant. I think I was maybe only 6 weeks or so out from my due date. And so we leave, and then it ends up like pouring rain. Our hotel is just like a couple blocks away, but this is like bonkers rain. And by the time we get back to the hotel, we are drenched, completely drenched. And I already knew when we showed up at the hotel to drop off our stuff that I had forgotten my bag that had like my contact solution, like things that I really needed. And I was like, shoot, I remember I was on like Instacart and DoorDash trying to get it delivered. No one would deliver contact solution to the hotel. I didn't have time to go back home, even though it was a quick drive. And so I was like, okay, well, my friend Kendra has a flight in the morning. We can drop our stuff up here. You and I can just go back. I'll leave my car at the hotel. We can drive home, sleep at my house. And then I got there and I was drenched, looking like a wet rat, a wet pregnant rat. And remember my clothes were drenched. I'd forgotten my bag that also had like a change of clothes in it. So then I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't wear those clothes anymore. And so I wore the hotel bathrobe. This is I can't even believe I'm telling this story. It's just
It's
like,
so good. It's so
oh
good.
my,
And I gotta say, you looked, honestly, you're being too hard on yourself. You looked beautiful. I remember like looking at her and I'm like, how does she have no frizz? Like, if that was me, they would have kicked me out.
oh, so I'm in the hotel bathrobe. We go downstairs. I'm like, okay, Ariana, we need to go. We need to get the car stat. We've got to get out of here. We're sitting in the lobby, and they lost my car. They didn't know where it was. We ended up sitting in this lobby. It was like so late at night. And I kept saying, like, Ariana, you don't have to wait here with me. Like, if you want to go back up to the room and you want to sleep there and like Uber back to my house in the morning, like, I totally understand. And this whole time, you guys, Ariana's just like physically and emotionally holding my little pregnant hand through this whole thing as we're waiting for, I think it was like 90 minutes before they came back. And they were like, it was a long time. And they were like, yeah, we can't find your car. And it was supposed to be like in the little valet lot. And I'm not really like a fancy valet gal, but that was the only option at the hotel. And I was like, what do you mean you can't find it? Like someone stole it or it's in a different park. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, we don't know. And that's what they told. I was like, okay. So then I'm like still in this bathrobe waiting in the lobby, so pregnant. I don't have a car. We can't get like an Uber or anything because there's still all this like backed up traffic because we're downtown. And they're like, okay, well, what we're going to do. And they're like, you know what, why don't you just stay here for the night? And I explained to them, like, well, I don't have clothes. I don't have a contact solution. I don't have all these things. I really just kind of need to get home. And they're like, okay, we'll get you a car. And I think we ended up getting back to my house at like 2 or 2:30 a.m. I had to drive home in this car and I'm like naked, like butt naked under this bathrobe with this huge belly. And we get back to my house at maybe like 2:30 in the morning. And I was just like, oh my gosh, Ariana. And, you know, I hope it's not a coincidence, but I will say not long after that, Ariana did give her notice at Teen Yoga for You and said she and said she was going to go and follow her dreams. And I thought, is this because you were subjected to me nude under a bathrobe for
No.
until 2:30 in the morning? And you thought, that's it. That's it. I give up. I quit.
No, honestly, like it was such a magical night. I remember like Kendra, because your best friend had already gone to the Eras tour in another state, and she had said, she was like, you're gonna feel like you're transported into another world. And I was like, we'll see about that. And it honestly was so true. Like I just felt like I had this like Taylor Swift, like pixie dust or something, like nothing was gonna ruin my night. And like I was just there and I was like, I'm like on a high right now. It was amazing. And I'm just so grateful that I got to experience it with you. You're incredible. And even in such a stressful situation, like you still remained like so present and calm. Your meditations work on you. So that's a message for today.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. I think about that all the time. And when I talk to Kendra, we'll talk about that. I'm like, yeah. And then remember, like Ariana was with us. And then I was like wet and nude in a bathrobe and like driving home in this like car from the hotel at 2:30 a.m. It is like, is that an Eras Tour cup? I don't record the video on it,
Yes.
but look at your cup.
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
you honestly, you changed my world. You changed my life, and now I totally forgot that I was drinking out of an Eras Tour cup.
I love it. It's a big cup, so you can fit a lot of water in there. That's what I love. I have those big. I know you've seen it before. People listening to this and be like, get to the point, people.
Yeah.
But I have those big beer steins that I know you've seen before, and you've been like, is
Yes.
that like a beer stein? And it's something that Ben, my husband, it's like these big glass like beer cups, and they're huge. I'm like, no, 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 they fit like so much water in there.
Yeah, you can drink so like I get so much water
Yes.
done throughout the day.
Yes. And so it's amazing. But, anyways, so the first thing that I kind of had on our outline, because as you know, as a listener and everyone else listening knows, sometimes my ADHD gets the best of me. I also could just like sit and chat with you about anything for forever. But since we're already talking about it, I thought it would be interesting to just kind of tell everyone like how we met and how we became friends, because you started as a listener. And then I remember, I'll tell my version of the story and then you tell me if I missed anything here or anything you want to add. I remember you were the first mentorship client that I had after Pork Chop was born. And I just remember sitting on the couch and I was feeding Pork Chop, scrolling on my phone, and your email came through and you were asking about Yoga Nidra mentorship and that you were wanting to really deepen your knowledge of Yoga Nidra, become a stronger teacher in it. And you're wondering if that was like something that I did. And you'd mentioned you were a listener. And I remember responding, I was like, you know, I do mentorships. I'm still kind of on maternity leave. So we'd have to kind of meet at weird hours. And I just remember feeling really excited that you had sent that email. And it felt like the first thing that I really started doing back from my maternity leave with Pork Chop. And we did meet late at night because you were working Ben was still in residency, so he was working these really wild hours, and so we'd meet like late at night after pork chop went to bed, and we just had so much fun, not only chatting and in the mentorship capacity. I feel like you really do get to know the person well, because it's not just learning how to deepen your understanding of yoga nidra and becoming a more proficient teacher, which was the topic we were working on, but it's also just like talking about stuff and like what maybe is potentially holding you back. Not that I'm a therapist or anything like that, but when you spend that amount of uninterrupted time with someone, you really do get to know them. And you're just such a light, and like such a bright light. And then we completed that mentorship and remained in contact throughout. And then when the position, which I lovingly refer to in my household as my cursed position, in a good way, because everyone who's in it is in it for a certain amount of time, and then they end up leaving for something like bigger and better in a great way. So like leaving to go and like start their own business, or maybe they already have their own business and then it's becoming so abundant that they no longer have the time to help support my business because they're pouring their heart and soul into theirs. And I love that. And like nothing makes me happier when people are like, I can't help support your business anymore or support your dream anymore because mine is becoming so abundant that I have to put my everything into that. And like, I'm always really sad when there's like a transitional period, but also it's like so amazing. And nothing makes me happier than to see people following their dream, thriving, and all of that. And so when that position opened up, I remember that you had mentioned when we were talking in our mentorship that like your dream would be to, you know, build your own business and to learn some of these different like skills. And so you were the first person that popped into my mind when I was like, who am I going to reach out to and see if they're available? I was kind of just thinking like, has anyone mentioned to me that they're looking for like a little side gig? And you just, I don't know, you popped into my head. And I remember, I think I DM'd you on Instagram and I was like, hey, by any chance, like, are you still kind of looking for a side hustle? And instantly it was just like, I don't know, just amazing. And I loved creating alongside of you for so long. And now you have your own business, which I want to hear about. I want to hear about Eddie. And yeah, I don't know. Did I leave anything out?
No, I feel like you touched on some really important parts. And I also wanted to say, too, you took the words out of my mouth. When I signed up for that mentorship with you, I had no idea what was in store. But I really think, like, looking back, that was such like a pivotal point for me because I was in a lot of just really not the most self-serving things. And I remember just talking to you, and you had such a fresh outlook on things, and you could just tell that you had just a healthier relationship to a lot of things in your life. And you really changed my life in a lot of ways. And I thought I was going into it to learn yoga nidra, but I learned so many other things that made me a better teacher, made me a better friend, made me a better daughter. So if anyone out there is considering or thinking about doing the mentorship with Kelly, this is not an ad. I'm just saying it will, warning sign, it will change your life. And it was amazing. And I loved getting to work with you one-on-one. I think you're an exceptional teacher. And I can see why when people work for you, like they end up going and doing bigger and better things. And I think that speaks to a lot of what you do because you're so like, I worked for you behind the scenes. You're so professional, even behind the scenes, guys. She is so thorough and you don't cut corners. And I think that really inspires people that get to be up close to you. It's like they always say, like, don't meet your heroes. And it's like, honestly, getting to work for you inspired me even more and made me love you even more. So I feel like you touched on all the important things and you're such an inspiration and you're an amazing colleague, boss, teacher, daughter, wife, mom, most importantly. And you're just awesome. And I'm really, really excited to be here today.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I could like cry listening to that. It's so
It's
sweet.
true.
People are going to listen, but they're going to be like, oh, Kelly just invites these people that are going to like, you know, hype her up. And, and that is not that, like, seriously, I'm like tearing up hearing that. That's so kind and thoughtful. And like, I could just say all the same things about you. And something that really resonated with me when during our time together in the mentorship was I remember you sharing, and I, you know, we talked about this off mic to make sure that like you're okay with, you know, what I'm about to share. But I remember you sharing your your desire for friends
Mm.
and the loneliness that you were experiencing. And I thought that like that resonated with me so much. And I didn't share as much of this with you in the mentorship because I mean, you were paying me money to be there in a professional capacity, but
Yeah.
everything that you were saying in that moment, like I had felt too, not necessarily in like, I feel like my big time of loneliness was before I hit my 20s. I feel like once I graduated college and kind of got out into like the quote real world,
Yeah.
that's when I started to flourish. And I had a really hard time up until that. And so much of what you said resonated with me. I remember you saying that part of your dream was to host women's circles because you had done women's circles before. And there was something that was so special to you about having women come together and connect. And I think you described it as it's kind of that same energy as like a really fun special like sleepover where you can like share but also be like silly and just come as you are and all of that. And that always stuck with me because so much of what you were describing of wanting in terms of friendship and connection and kind of finding your people was something that I had felt as well. And that was part of what really inspired me. There's two things that I wanted to touch on today. One is kind of talking about that because I've been hearing a lot from, listeners, also just, other people that I have relationships with about loneliness and how we're lonely. And even if we're connected to people like through social media or even like listening to podcasts, like you feel like, oh, I know this person because like their voice is in my ears every week. But like what we're really missing is connection and like true friendship. And I say it every episode, but if there's one thing I could do if I had a time machine and if I could go back to like I think like my peak loneliness was actually probably college. And
Mm.
I remember in college, I would just like truly like pray that someone would want to hang out with me. And I'd hear about like everyone else's plans. And I'd be in the dorm room and I could like hear everyone else like getting ready and like their friends coming over to like theirs. I could hear this like weekend, you know, just like jubilee of everyone getting ready to go do things. And I was like, I don't have anywhere to go or anywhere to like, get ready. And I didn't really feel like I fit in there. And I did have a couple of like friends, but they kind of had their own like friend groups. And I still have a few friends. Like I have one close friend from college and like we were definitely friends, but like she had her own friend group that I didn't necessarily, I wasn't necessarily a part of, which I think is always tricky to navigate. Like, you get these like different friend groups and then you're
Yeah.
like the outsider. And I just remembered so much of what you were describing, knowing what that feeling was. And so I want to talk about navigating that because we both have had those, periods of time. And I know a lot of people have had, I imagine almost everyone at some point in their life knows that feeling. And then what I thought could be fun is because you are in your 20s and I am in my 30s. I saw this thing, I think it was on like TikTok. And it was something where it was like women in your 20s ask, leave questions here and women in your 30s and 40s answer or something like that. And I thought it could be fun to kind of play on that where I have questions for you and then you have questions for me. We haven't shown each other. And then we can just kind of chat and ask each other these questions that we're curious about being in these two very different stages of life.
I
So,
would love that. I would
yes.
absolutely love it. I'm so excited. So to touch on loneliness, I feel like it's such a bigger conversation, and I know we'll get into it with our questions, but I think the most important thing for me is like I feel like I spent like a good chunk of my life, probably I'm going to say with no exaggeration, 10 years of really feeling just like I remember putting I think I told you this. I would, before Pinterest was around, I would go to Google and type in like girls eating at a restaurant. And I remember putting it in like vision boards at the time and putting it in my room and people coming over and being like, why do you have like random girls on your vision board, like doing like basic things? And I remember it was always kind of like for me, like having friendships where it felt like almost like freckles. Like I was just like, are you just born with it? Like, can I get freckles later? Like, how does it happen? And my older sister, she has always been a girl that's always had tons of friends. And it was really challenging growing up because I would always see her life felt so full and in that way. And I was just always like, oh my goodness, like how do I get there? And I feel like people don't really talk about it a lot, but I remember she'd said something to me, friendships take work. And I know you always see my friends calling me, but what you probably don't see is when I'm checking on them. And that always stayed with me. And I was like, you know what? Maybe this is my time to really see like, how am I how am I as a friend, and really taking inventory. And I was like, well, I don't check up on people. I don't really reach out. And it's really like another relationship in your life. So, with starting Eddie, my skincare line, it's really forced me in a great way to get out there and make connections. And, if someone doesn't respond or something, it's okay to follow up. You're not a burden. And I think really taking that pressure off yourself and seeing what of value you are. And, they say like build and your people will come. And it's really been that experience. And I can honestly say, I feel like I'm in a place in my life where it feels really full, and I've met so many amazing people. So I think the one advice I would say that, if I could have done sooner and what I'm doing now is just really putting myself out there and asking people on coffee dates, asking people on walks, and really treating it like a dating life. Because you're amazing, and anyone who's listening to this is amazing. And if you want to make friends, if you want to get out there, put yourself out there. And I know it's scary, but you will be better off because of it.
I couldn't agree more. And that was something that I wanted to ask you about because it's been a little bit of time since we've caught up. And I was curious how like friendship building is going for you now. And I remember when we were getting ready to go to the concert and, we were like making friendship bracelets. And then you were like, and I hadn't done this in like so long. You were like, oh, Kelly, can you curl my hair? And I was like, yeah, I can curl your hair. And it just had been like so long since I had just like hung out, like got ready with friends and being like, oh, I love the way you curl your hair. Can you help like curl my, I don't know, just stuff like that. Where I was like, it just felt so good, so fun. But I was curious how friendship and making friends is going for you now, because one thing that I think you're touching on that I want to highlight is yes, I think definitely put yourself out there. I think that's so important. But also, I think the more you get connected to who you are and you start living in a place that feels right and in alignment to yourself and to your dreams and like your own happiness, I feel like that's when people come as well. Like that authenticity is magnetic. And I remember feeling a really big shift in terms of friends when I started yoga for you. And I just became happier. I was pouring my heart and soul into something. I was doing the work to really get to know myself better. And that's where I feel like I felt a big shift in my loneliness. And it was like other people that also were pouring their hearts into something and were following a dream or even just like loved yoga, then they started like showing up. And I was like, wow, we have this thing in common. And that's really all you need is like even the tiniest little thing in common with someone to spark a friendship or to spark a relationship or a connection. And so I'm so happy to hear that it sounds like it's changing for you, but tell me more about making friends now or catch me up on friendships now.
I would say, like, I've been, especially with Eddie, one of the biggest things I've been trying to do is get on retreats because there's nothing like being in community with people. And, with skincare, it's funny. It's always been my way of bonding with people when I was a kid. Like, people always ask me, like, how did you know to go into skincare? I'm like, it's all I've ever known. Like, it's just, I think of skincare as almost like a sport for me. It was a hobby when I was younger. You know, like I said, I didn't have really friends growing up. So skincare was something that I did on my free time. Like I remember on Fridays and Saturdays asking my mom to take me to CVS, and I would spend like an hour in the I almost called it a hallway, in the aisle. Like looking at, all that was my Sephora. They didn't have Sephora at that time. So it was just always, it became like just a part of me, a backbone. And I remember just getting into it and getting good at something. And it felt like, oh my gosh. And then when I would go to school and people would ask me about my skin and I'd be like, oh, this is what I'm using. I could feel this, like almost this fire connection happening. And so I always it was always like my little, I don't want to say superpower, but it was something that I was always kind of like a party trick. Like I would pull out, and it was a way for me to connect with others, and especially women. It's getting different now, but it was very different 10, 15 years ago with other women, because there was just, we always had this kind of thing I think kind of looming in the air of like, it was just harder to bond with other girls because maybe they felt a certain way, and being able to break those barriers and be like, hey, like I really like you. I think you're really cool. And, so yeah, going back, skincare was always a way of bonding for me. So now getting to do it professionally, it's like been amazing because now when I go out in the world and a girl comes up to me or I go up to other people and they're like, oh, what are you using on your skin? I'm like, well, yeah, I'll be at the airport or something will happen. And it's just been so natural. And so the other day I was actually at the airport and a girl came up to me asking me about my skin. And I was like, well, I don't want to be a walking ad, but I am using my own line. And then cut to 20 minutes later, I'm invited to her book club and we're adding each other on Instagram. And I think that we put a lot of pressure sometimes on how friendships are going to work or how it's going to look. And it could just literally be in the security checkpoint line. And then you find out you live 15 minutes from each other and they have a book club. And then you're going to all of a sudden meet 20 other women that are interested in what you're doing. So I think I took the pressure off how it was going to look. And I have put myself in so many things. I don't recommend, burnout, but I'm in so many things right now. And even if it doesn't work out business wise, I have made a friend, and that to me, that's been successful. And you just never know what your neighbor, I mean, I have a neighbor. I don't think she would mind me saying this. She's so cool. Me and my sister joke, we're like, she's too cool to live here. Like, this girl is too cool to live here. And she invited me to her house the other day. And I felt like, oh my goodness, like I'm not cool enough for this. And I remember chatting with her and I'm giving her a bottle of Eddie and she goes, oh my gosh, my friend owns Glow Recipe. And I'm like, oh my God, they're like a huge brand. And she's like, yeah, I would love to introduce you one day. And so you just never know. It could be your neighbor. It could be, we have a grocery store called Publix. I don't know what it is in Minnesota, but you just never know who you're going to meet at what time. So just be open to the connection. The same way we're always saying about romantic relationships, same way with friendship. And I read this quote the other day. It was from this lady, and she said, I will never once again neglect my female friendships. They picked me up from my divorce. They're the most powerful friendship. They're the most powerful relationship on earth. And even though I haven't been married or anything like that, I do agree with the last part where I do agree that our female friendships or, platonic relationships are the most powerful things we have. And that will be, the fertile, if you will, to a really enriching life. And that's just how I gone about my business. And just everything that I'm doing right now is centered around relationships and friendships and how I can be a better friend, how I can be of service, and really pouring into others.
You are so wise. One of the many things that I love about you is I feel like every time we chat, you give me a little like nugget of wisdom that I
Mhm.
sit with and I'll think about it like hours later, days later, even like months later, it'll like pop back into my mind something that you said. And it's always just like so profound. And I think that you hit the nail on the head of those platonic friendships being so important. Something that I've talked to my therapist about is how I feel like every relationship that you have serves a different purpose. And I don't mean that to minimize,
Mhm.
certain relationships that I have, but I think about, my marriage, that's a relationship that has a different purpose. And my partner fulfills different things in me, compared to like you or say, Daniela or the other, or even Kendra, the other friends that I have. It's like every relationship that you have is so significant and important in its own special way. And different people in your life fill these different needs that you have and can pick you up in different ways, can support you in different ways. Same with like the relationship that I have with my kids or like my mom or, every relationship that you have, it kind of gives something different in your life. And I do think that those kind of platonic, you and I both, being women, those platonic female friendships are so important and so nourishing in a really special, unique way. But that's something that I think about in terms of all of my relationships is it sounds weird to say like what are they giving me? It's not that at all. It's not like what are they giving
Yeah.
me, but it's like what part of my life is being enriched by this individual, and it's always something different.
Yep.
And I think about that with each relationship that I have, and it helps me to be uniquely grateful for the different relationships that I have and what that person brings to the table to kind of enrich and make me a better person, to, activate a different part of my mind and my heart. And I hope to be that for other people too, because I think when it comes to friendships or relationships in general, it is a two-way street. And I have two kind of litmus tests for a friend, because something I've been talking about recently, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Ariana, as someone who is still working on expanding their circle. I have been talking a lot about letting your circle shrink in a way and letting it get smaller, which is basically my way of saying, if there are people there, well, okay, so my two litmus tests, one is the feeling test. And so I feel like a really good person, be it a friend, a partner, a colleague, whatever it is, you feel better after you spend time with them. And it's not to say that there aren't ups and downs or that you can't have disagreements, or, the general trajectory of how you feel when you're with that person over time is up. Those are the people that you keep in your life. Now, if you generally feel worse after being with that person and you're like, or even if you feel neutral, you can kind of decide, I leave it up to you to decide what you want to do with the people where you just kind of feel like neutral. But if every time you spend time with that person, or most times you're with that person, you feel like you either feel worse about yourself, or you find yourself becoming more negative, or you're engaging in behaviors like maybe you're a Gemini like me. And sometimes, you love to listen to a little gossip. Like I try not to gossip. I don't
Okay.
like that behavior, like personally for myself, but maybe you find yourself engaging in more of that, or just like drinking more than you would, like all of these things when you spend time with people, making note of that. And those are the people that you don't have to necessarily, you can if you want, but you don't have to say like, I don't want to be friends with you anymore, I don't want this connection. But you can just kind of let that relationship take its course, and then you just don't have to pour a lot of energy into it, and spend more time pouring energy into the people where you just feel better. It's like your body reacts positively to being around them, and vice versa. Like I try to recognize that in my relationships too, that every relationship has like a certain cycle. It'll have ebbs and flows. And although I always want to be the person where people feel better after interacting with me, if that's not the case for someone, I, acknowledge and accept and respect if they decide that as they shrink their circle, that I'm not a part of it. Even if that hurts in my heart, like I respect that for the individual as well. And so that's my one kind of litmus test is, how do you feel after you're with someone? But I'm curious if there's anything. Well, one, I'm curious on your thoughts on that, because I know you're working on expanding your circle. So I'm curious what it feels like to hear me say, don't be afraid to shrink your circle. And do you have any kind of a friendship litmus test to tell, like, are these people that I want to have in my life, or these are people where, I'm kind of okay with letting this relationship run its course? And then I always say, I've Marie Kondoed it, like, thank you for what you've given me. Goodbye. Have you noticed at this time of year, the back to school season, Virgo season, the upcoming holiday season, it just ramps up the stress? It's like we're stressing more, we're maybe a little bit more anxious, having a harder time sleep. I've been feeling this as my first back to school season as a mom, but also every year when September rolls around, I'm like, why am I so stressed? What is going on? And I think that it is time for us to start feeling calmer, thinking more clearly, sleeping better. And we can now do that with the new Truvaga Plus. I love Truvaga Plus. It is so cool. It is this handheld kind of device that stimulates the vagus nerve to help to improve overall health and wellness. You kind of turn it on, you place it on the vagus nerve, and it creates kind of like this electrical pulse. And you can complete like a 2-minute session in the morning, in the evening, when you're feeling stressed. And we all know the benefits of stimulating the vagus nerve. You have heard me talk about this and how important it is. And I think that it is so cool that there's now this handheld device that you can use to specifically stimulate your vagus nerve. I have been loving incorporating it into my meditation routine. So doing a little bit of vagus nerve stimulation with Truvaga Plus and then going into my practice. And I really feel like it gets me into that calm state faster. It's like kind of the perfect like meditation primer in my opinion. And I also feel like my sleep has improved overall, which is amazing. I love that. So I feel like we all need to try Truvega Plus, but why pay full price? Right now, you can visit truvega.com/mindful in minutes for $15 off your order. That's TRUVAGA.com/mindful in minutes to enhance your wellness journey and get $15 off your Truvega or Truvega Plus device. That's TRUVAGA.com/mindful in minutes. I don't know. What do you think about all that?
I actually agree. I think that's a really good I guess rule. I don't know if it's like rule of thumb what the word would be, but I think that's really important to pay attention, especially when you're starting to make friends. And I agree. I've definitely had friendships. I think that's probably what stirred me away for so long is because I would kind of keep on to friendships that I had from childhood or something that I was just like, wow, I've really outgrown this. And I've never liked how I felt, but I've just kind of stayed in this because it's like we sat every day together senior year at lunch. And, if you remember high school, like who you were going to sit with at the cafeteria was like
Mm-hmm.
everything. But I do think my sister, it's going back to my sister, she had taught me this a long time ago because I would be I looked at everyone through a lens of like, is this going to be my best friend? And I think that there's a little bit of desperation that comes with that when you don't feel like, I think there's like a misconception that you have to have a best friend. And it's like, my ride or die, my sisterhood, and I always see you and Daniela, and you guys are such a great example because you guys are like just the cutest best friends. And so I went into everything with that kind of tunnel vision of like, okay, is this going to be my best friend? And so I did have that kind of test of like, okay, I don't like the way I feel after this, but I've grown into, especially with Eddie, there's a certain level of like professionalism that kicks in where you're like, okay, not everyone needs to be my best friend. And kind of going back to, not saying serves a purpose, but do I enjoy, I can go out and have tacos with this person, have a great time, and it doesn't need to be anything more than that. I don't need to overshare, which is also something that I'm looking at as well, because not getting too much into it, but growing up, my business was always out in the open from like my parents. And so I think that was just like, I always thought, okay, the way that I'm going to bond with someone is I'm just going to trauma bond. I'm going to overshare, even though I just met you 20 minutes ago in the checkout line, And so I think I've really reeled it in. And I'm like, this could just be someone that I go on a walk with. And I really enjoy the walk. And it doesn't need to be anything more than that. This is my walking buddy. So I think also looking at it too because I definitely think we're in a time right now where, it's great that everyone's seeing a therapist, but there's so many words out there and people are calling everyone toxic and blocking everyone out of their life. And sometimes it's okay to just look at someone and be like, this is good where it is. I don't have to put myself into any situation that I don't like. I don't have to go on a trip with you. I don't have, you could just be an Instagram friend and I could just reply to your stories like, yes, queen, So that's just kind of how I'm looking at it as well. But I definitely think the feelings test is amazing, especially if you're looking into curating a smaller circle. Definitely look at that. But if you're looking at it as like a whole view and you're like, you know what, I really want to expand my circle. I want to make some more girlfriends. I think it's okay for someone to just be, I don't want to say a going out buddy. It doesn't necessarily have to be drinking or, it could be going on hikes, going to the movies, having a book club, something like that. And I think that's a really great way to kind of keep your circle open.
I love that perspective. I have never thought of it that way. So there is another thing that I'm going to sit with for a while and I'll think about. I'll probably send you like a voice note like a month from now being like,
Love
I'm
that.
still thinking about that thing that you said about friendship. And you know what? I do think that really taking the pressure off of it in that way and just letting each relationship be what it is. Like, not everyone is going to be your best friend. Not everyone is going to be your soulmate. Again, you can support people in like different ways. I
Yep.
have, my friends where I feel like we really support each other in motherhood and, really talk openly about what we're experiencing, like with our kids and as a mom and things like that. But we may not necessarily be talking about other things, or we may not even necessarily like be in the same place. A lot of my mom friends live, in different places. And so we may not be seeing each other, catching up for hikes, or that's so interesting. I really appreciate you sharing all of that.
Of
Do you
course.
want to get into some questions?
Yes, I'm so excited.
Okay. So we kept these blinds from one another. When I floated this idea, I was like, don't tell me your questions. I won't tell you mine. Should we just alternate?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Why
Let's
don't you
do
go
it.
first?
Okay, so actually, I really want to ask you this question, and I forgot to write it down, but I think it's like a fun one to start with. What would you say would be a Taylor Swift song that you would recommend someone in their 20s that may be going through it, whatever it may be, whether it's heartbreak, career, something? What is a song that you would recommend?
Oh my gosh, oh, that is a toughie because something that I appreciate about Taylor Swift is her storytelling and her ability to encapsulate a feeling and an experience that feels so specific, but also at the same time is like really broad, like it speaks to so many people. And I think when it comes to art and music is art, that it's open to your own interpretation.
Mm.
But you know what? I don't know. You might have stumped me with this first question. Okay. I think that in general, if you're really going through it, I think that I'm just going to say an album. I think
Okay.
maybe folklore and or evermore is, and you can come, Swifties can come fight with me in the, in the DMs. I do have my Swifty friends where we, do power rankings of things. But I think if you're really going through it, like folkmore, the folkmore to mush it together kind of
Yeah,
albums, I think that's a great place to start. I
I
really
agree.
like it. I think that there's a good mix of like the I'm really sad, also like to me tolerate it is one of the like saddest songs ever. It also, sometimes it's, I don't know, it's one that resonates with me at times of like
Mhm.
not always feeling seen or like appreciated. And so like that one's a good one. There's just so many goes, but I would say if you're just starting,
Okay.
maybe folklore and evermore, give them a listen. There will probably be a song on there where you're
Yeah,
like, ooh, that really speaks to the specific hurt that,
yeah,
or even anger or whatever you're feeling around that tough time. But that's where I personally would start. I know those aren't always like everyone's favorite albums, but they're definitely mine. It also has a special place in my heart because when Folklore was dropped, I was actually on my baby moon with Pork Chop.
yeah,
And Pork Chop and I listened to that album while he was in my belly so much. And it's still one of his favorite albums. He really likes it. And I think it's because, and they've done studies on this of like the music that you listen to when you're pregnant, that sometimes the babies can like, it's like they recall it. And I personally, this doesn't have to do with a particular hurt. I know the song Invisible String is not about motherhood.
oh,
However,
oh,
it
we
is
could have a whole
really,
other episode about that song. I am in love with that song.
so I like to interpret it as I know this was not what it was meant to, the intention behind it. I like to look at that idea of like fate and choices playing out for, kind of a surprise but fateful end. I like to look at that through a motherhood lens, in which I think about like my kids, particularly like Pork Chop, and I would listen to that song. It would just kind of make me feel emotional of like, there's all of these things that happened in my life, and this led to another thing, and this led to another thing, and there are ups and there's downs, or, sadness, all of this, but like it ultimately led me to you.
Yep.
And I know she didn't write it in the motherhood lens, but I really like to apply that concept to
Beautiful.
my children and motherhood.
I love
And so, yeah, so that's how I like to interpret that song of like, there was this little invisible string. And I do believe that like you can have these like soul babies and like our kids can choose us as parents. And so thinking about, there's these things that happened in my life that ultimately led me to like the most important thing, which was getting to meet Pork Chop and Poppy. So that one I like.
I love that.
Yeah. So there's that. I'm really kind of like airing out my Swifty side in
Thank you for
this.
answering that.
Oh yeah, that is it's really hard for me to like pick one because I do think that music in general, every song is going to be uniquely specific to your interpretation and like what you're going through with
Yep.
any artist. It's up to interpretation. Okay, a question I had for you. I thought we could start it off light too, and feel free to roast me in this one. What is something that I do that is millennial mom of me?
Gosh, I feel like this is hard because you're such a cool mom. So
That
like, I'm
not
serious.
accurate. Don't lie on this podcast.
No, I'm serious. You're really, gosh, she's really cool. I've seen her
Oh
behind
my
the
God.
scenes.
I am not a cool mom.
Oh gosh, I feel like I don't even know. This is such a good one.
I feel like that's my blind spot,
I
blindness or
know.
whatever. I feel
I
like I
know.
have like millennial mom blindness where sometimes I'm like, I wouldn't even know if that's a thing that I was doing or if I fell into that particular trope.
I don't even know. I don't even know if I have anything specific because I feel like you've put me on to so many things, like really cool stuff. But probably like if I, what I think is like very millennial about you, I feel like
Tell me.
can't even say it. But I feel like when we first got you on TikTok, I remember you were like, how do I work this? Like, I feel like that would probably be the only thing that I'm just like, Kelly, like you're literally running like this like amazing podcast. And I feel like the podcast is like so hard to do. And like TikTok feels like so weirdly simple but complex. And you're like, I don't know what to do on here. So probably like if I had to choose, probably something like that.
You mean when I was actually, instead of being a millennial, I was like a boomer and I was like, Ariana, I don't even know what buttons to push.
I know that's probably like the only, and that's like me forcing it out of me. Like I'm just like, I don't even know. Probably yeah, TikTok, but
Oh,
TikTok's got us all stumped.
I don't, it is a stumper and I still only lightly dabble in it. And you were so good at one thing that I appreciate about you that I meant to even say before we hit record on this, but when we were working together, you had some really great ideas and like ones that kind of push me out of my comfort zone where you're like, well, just dabble with, with TikTok. You also had the idea of taking the scripts that I had in the script shop and also selling them on Etsy because a lot of
Love.
people look for like digital downloads. And that's something that has been like really successful. I meant to tell you this because I was talking about it with Alyssa from Iceland, who is now in your position as of recently.
Oh, I love her.
And I was telling her, and she was like, "Oh, who came up with like this Etsy idea?" And I was like, "Ariana came up with it." And she was like, "It's genius." And anyways, we were talking about what like a phenomenal idea that was. But I do remember having a good amount of time laughing, with me and at me on when I was trying to figure out what buttons to push to even like make. I think I said something like, I'm like a TikTok consumer. Like
Yeah,
I know how to scroll and like I see people doing it, but I just like couldn't even figure out what buttons to push. Yeah, that's
yeah.
definitely very like
TikTok's got us
millennial. I was
all.
like, I'm comfortable with Instagram. What is this new platform?
I love it.
Okay, your turn.
Okay, so mine is all right. I have so many ones that I want to ask you, but I'm going to go with this one first. What is one money decision you think is important for women in their 20s to start implementing?
Oh, saving, but specifically, I think it's important to kind of do an audit of your finances. So this is something that I do with my business every month. It's also something that now personally I do anytime Ben or I, have a paycheck coming in as I kind of do like a quick audit of like, where is everything at? Where are the credit cards at? Where's the savings account? Just a brief high level, like where's everything at? What's coming in versus what's going out, looking at it with an objective lens. So when I look at my business, and I think I know I've told you this before, I'm just like, data doesn't really lie. So if I look at the numbers and I'm like, okay, X amount of dollars are coming in, but I'm spending X amount of dollars doing this and
Mhm.
looking at it as if it's not even my money. It would be like if you handed me your books and you're like, Kelly, look at this. And I think we had this conversation actually here in the co-working space that I'm at because when you came to visit, we did a co-working day here. And I also, this is an ADHD tangent, but I remember you were showing me the mock-ups of the labels for Eddie when you were
Yes.
here. And you're like, I just got these back. What do you think about? Anyway, so fond memories. But I think
Yeah.
we were talking about this where I said, look at your business objectively as if like the finances of it as if it isn't yours. So if I were to look at your business and I were to say, well, Ariana, you are, let's say you're making $5,000 a month, but you are spending, $4,000 a month on marketing. That's a
Mhm.
huge portion of what you're spending. And look at what's actually turning the dial and what is giving you your return on investment. And double down on those things and then look at the stuff that really isn't turning the dial, and then start to scale back on that. And I take that same policy and I apply it to my personal finances, where I look at things. It's not always, necessarily like return on investment, but I look at dollars in versus dollars out every time a paycheck comes in. We're dual income now, being a household, and looking at it objectively, as if I was looking at someone else's finances and being like, oh, like you're spending, for me, the one place that I will spend more is travel. We don't, as a family, travel a lot, but that's something where I'd be like, oh, you're, spending X amount on family vacations, but this amount is coming in, and taking the feeling out of it, and then making sure that there is always money left over to start saving now, especially, well, everyone should be saving. Open a high yield savings account if you haven't already. You can get a great, at a bare minimum, get a high yield savings account, contribute to it every month, let it grow. Do not touch that money. And especially if, like, for us, we were single income for so long because my husband was in medical school, residency, all, like he wasn't a quote doctor until not even 2 years ago. Really recently, we were single income. And so, we had to be really diligent about our finances. And also, we couldn't wait until our mid 30s to then start saving when we finally became dual income. So yeah, treat it kind of like a business, look at it objectively, imagine it's like someone else's finances. And when you do that, you'll be able to kind of see some blind spots, or you're like, oh, maybe it's eating out, or, oh, maybe it's, this. Yeah, I think that's something that you could do, and start, even if you haven't now, even if it's just a little bit, open like a high yield savings account. I'm not like a financial advisor. This is what I have done personally. But even when we were single income, making sure that there was always something left over that we're setting aside for savings, because you never know, even if it's a rainy day fund. Since we got our starter home, we've had to get a new furnace. The main line has collapsed. The chimney needed to be re-mortared. All of this stuff that you're just like, once you become an adult and you're like, oh, I didn't, or, healthcare here isn't great. All of a sudden you get this big medical bill.
Yeah.
Start setting aside now, even if you're not even in your 20s. If you're old enough to open a high yield savings account, open it and start setting money aside.
I love that. Do you have, really quickly, because I feel like your listeners are going to ask, do you have one that you would recommend or that you really like?
Like a high yield savings account?
Because I just opened one with SoFi, but I don't know if that's
I have one with Synchrony. You know
okay.
what? But I opened it a long time ago. And when I did, they had, you can get really great rates right now on a high yield savings account. And when I opened mine, there was not a lot to choose from.
Okay. So
So,
it's a quick Google
yeah, and I'm
search.
still happy with it. Yes. So I would definitely do a Google search, get something
Mhm.
that's going to give you a good rate of return. Maybe ask someone who knows more about finances than me.
Yeah,
But yeah, yeah, just
I love
Google
it.
it. Yeah. Okay.
It.
What is something you hope to have achieved by your 30s, and why is that thing so important to you?
Oh, I love this. I'm going to be probably 29 when this episode comes out. So I would love, love, love to be able to achieve fully working for myself, being kind of more financially independent in that way with my own business. And it's important to me because I want to be able to my core to show myself I can do it. I feel like a lot of people struggle with this, not feeling like they're enough or not feeling like them alone, that they're able to do it. So I feel like this is just kind of like a very personal core goal for me. And to be able to do that in my 30s, it would just be a really big dream come true.
I think it's really cool to highlight that you are also working another job while you're building Eddie. I did that for so long while I was building
Yes.
yoga for you, while I was building mindful in
Mhm.
minutes. And I think for so many people, when you're building a business, when you're following a dream, it rarely is like it blows up overnight and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving my 9 to 5 job and now I'm doing this and this is doing amazing. It really is kind of this slow,
Mhm.
building your business over time. And then eventually you get to the place where you're like, okay. And it feels really scary because I know you will get to that point. It feels really scary when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually doing this. Like, my only source of income is going to be from what I'm doing for myself.
Yeah.
And it's scary, it's freeing, it's liberating, it's exciting, all of those things. But for a lot of people, like building a business, if you're like, oh, well, I felt like this a lot where I was like, oh, it's not like, a real business, or it's not as legit because I still have to work this other business on the side, or, nanny on the side, or do all this other stuff. It is still a legit business, 100%, even if you're working another thing on the side. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you highlighting that as well.
Yes. Don't be afraid to keep your 9 to 5 until you feel ready. Don't
Yep.
let that make you feel you're any less of a business person. I agree with that.
No, not at all.
Okay, so mine is, what is one piece of advice you'd give someone in their 20s that's preparing for motherhood? And now I know this can be controversial, and there's so many opinions, but just in your opinion, from your experience, what is something that you would look on and be like, oh, would have been something that you would tell me or a sister or a little cousin?
Yeah. Ooh, so many things. One thing, and I love that you highlight that this is definitely just specifically for
Your
women, or
opinion?
the people, yeah, the people who want to pursue motherhood, or feel, pulled to be a
Hold
mom,
to
or
it.
thinking of it. Yeah. Or, this is for a very kind of specific niche, and definitely hold space here for every decision. I think first I want to say, when it comes to motherhood, nothing has made me more supportive of people just doing their own thing, whether that be becoming a parent or not, or being unsure, or still figuring out whatever it is. Like when I
Mhm.
became a mother, that only made me like double down and support other people doing whatever they wanted to do, like a million times more, because motherhood, and this, like, I wanted motherhood more than anything. Like, it was so, it was something that I always felt pulled to do. Like, meeting my kids is just like the most special thing to me. There's been different ups and downs in that process. I don't go necessarily want to share too deep. That's something I just want to keep private within my family. But, you know, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't always an easy journey. And I just, I would say that there's never a right time, but
Mhm.
there's definitely sometimes a better time, is one piece of advice. So there's never going to be a perfect time. So if you're waiting and you're saying, okay, well, I want to be, I want to have X amount of dollars in a savings account. I want to be promoted to this particular position. I want to make sure I have a house that has a minimum of this many bedrooms. You have this big long checklist. I think we have a tendency to have a checklist, or a, must achieve before list.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
me,
think there's,
Virgo.
yeah, yes. And, I think that there's definitely better times than others. For example, Ben and I, we knew it'd be a better time to wait until at least Ben was in residency, because we knew with the way that my job is, and like we couldn't have me taking this long maternity leave and him still being like in the thick of schooling. We were also moving a ton when he was still in school. We knew once he was in residency, we would be in a place for, at least a good amount of time. There's so many different factors. So I do think that sometimes looking at, what would necessarily be like a better time, um, is good, but there's never going to be like a perfect, if you're waiting for like the perfect time to start a family, there isn't one. And also there's going to be so many ups and downs and surprises where, you don't even know to think of it, where you're like, oh, I didn't even know that maybe I should have done this or that, or, waited until this time. Like, there's always going to be pros and cons no matter when you decide it's like your time. Just do your best to kind of trust your gut on it. Also, this is more of like birth advice, but I always say, like, it's really baby's birth plan. This advice at least helped me, um, was recognizing that, like, I could certainly have preferences. I
Mhm.
could have a certain way that I wanted birth to go. Did I have preferences in wanting pork chops birth to go a certain way? Yeah. Is that how it went? No. Is that, did I have a certain way I would have wanted poppies to go? Yeah. Did it necessarily go that way? No. But remembering that, trusting my body, trusting my medical care team, trusting pork chop and poppy, and realizing that it's kind of going to be like their birth story in a way too, helped me at least to let go of some of that anxiety around actual giving birth, knowing that, there's, different things at play there. That really helped me. And I think also, like being realistic with yourself. Like, for example, like if, let's say, for example, you have a tendency to be, really anxious and you're worried about having postpartum anxiety, which I had, especially with pork chop, is way better with Poppy. Or maybe you're worried about like postpartum depression, or you're worried about not having a support team. All of those things are so real and so valid. And start putting, if you're thinking about starting a family, or maybe you're currently pregnant, start taking steps now to help support yourself postpartum. That could be talking about your partner about your concerns. That can be maybe creating a relationship with a therapist now. That can be reaching out to family members or friends, talking to your doctor. A big one for me was making sure that I continued my meditation practice while I was pregnant with Poppy, and continued it even down to the day. I did a few minutes of meditation when Poppy was sleeping and only a few hours old, because that has always been such a significant piece of like my nervous system regulation. And so setting myself up, because when you're in the thick of it, that's not the time where you're like, okay, I'm going to create this great routine to help care for myself, to nourish my nervous system. All that, you can't do that when you're in the thick of it. So start taking steps now to support your mental health and your well-being, even before you get pregnant, to help have a more supported postpartum experience.
That is wonderful advice.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I think that's great because I'm taking that with me.
Well, and I have so much more to say. So if anyone listening to this has specific questions, just like send me a DM on Instagram. I'm always happy to answer these questions, but I always like to answer them kind of like individually, because motherhood, pregnancy, postpartum, it's such a unique journey, not even from person to person, but also from pregnancy to pregnancy. And so sometimes I hate to make these like big, broad statements about becoming a mother or being pregnant or the postpartum experience, because it is so unique to each individual and, each baby and all of that. So yeah, so my DMs are always open for that sort of thing, if you have questions on it and you're in that particular phase.
I love it.
Okay. Oh gosh, I have so many questions for you too. What keeps you up at night?
Oh gosh. Okay. So prior to owning a business, I feel like the anxiety of just, I feel like the kind of doomsday question of like, what am I going to do with my life? Is this really it? Like, am I just going to kind of do this job that isn't really fulfilling me forever? Like, when is kind of, I feel like the pressure that we put on ourselves to find our purpose and then make it a career, that used to keep me up. And then since starting Eddie, it's like, as soon as my head hits that pillow, it's crap, did I answer that email? Or oh my gosh, I have to run to the post office super early. Or oh my goodness, I need to get out of bed and write my checklist. It's kind of just that never ending to-do list. That's kind of what keeps me up at night right now.
I feel that.
Yeah. Okay. There's like so many that I want to ask you. How has your self-care practice changed and grown since being in your 30s?
I have started doing my self-care practice has changed in terms of like what I do. It's gotten shorter because I just have a little bit less time. There's more people that rely on me that I need to, also contribute to like pork chop and Poppy's care. So it's gotten shorter, but I would say I am doing more of things that just, to me, self-care looks like having fun, doing things that just feel good just because, and not comparing a past version of myself to current circumstances. So maybe I used to sit in meditation for longer, 20 plus minutes.
Mhm.
A lot of times now it's just 10 minutes. And
Oh,
self care in and of itself for me is then not beating myself up over being like, well, I used to sit for 20. It
yeah.
doesn't matter. I'm sitting in my meditation and it's helping me, and I'm doing the best I can with what I have right now. And so a big piece of self-care is also just being kinder to myself in the way that I think and talk. I've also been enjoying more like journaling, some creative writing. Like I think my self-care practice has just expanded to include a lot more things of like, you know what, it would feel really good to go for a walk right now. So I'm going to do that. Or sometimes I'm feeling spicy. I'm like, it feels really good to go for like a walk jog. So maybe I'll do that. Or like, it would just feel really good to put some ideas down, pen on paper. And so I'll do that, and not being as regimented, and just doing what feels good and nourishing, and letting that be different, and also letting that be shorter and more succinct, and knowing that that's not a bad thing. It's just different.
Love that. I also too feel like the more you grow in your own practice, I think you really start to get intuitive about what you need that day. So I feel like that's awesome.
Mhm.
My question for you is a movie, book, show, something that, or an experience that really shaped you. It could be
Hmm.
something small too. Like,
Yeah, I think, I don't do a lot of, I do sometimes watch shows, sometimes I don't do a lot of like shows and movies, especially like recently. One book that I always say that I love is The Yamas and Niyamas by Deborah Adele. So the Yamas and the Niyamas are the first two limbs of yoga. And I feel like the way that she lays them out in a very kind of tactile, grounded way, the Yamas and the Niyamas are basically like how you should interact with the world and how you should interact with yourself as like a yogi. It's a quick read, but I feel like every time I pick it up and I read it, I love it so much. I assign it in yoga teacher training. I feel like I find something new in that book that resonates with me. And then a more recent one that I've been enjoying is I picked up a handful of when I was on vacation in Scotland with my family. I picked up some Scottish poetry books because I've
ooh,
been trying to dabble in poetry and I've just been enjoying. There's one, I think it's called like Daily Scottish Poems or something like that. And there's a different Scottish poet, one of their poems is highlighted for like every day. So something I've been doing is, the day that we're recording this, for example, like tonight, I'll go back and even though Pork Chop doesn't fully get necessarily poetry, I'm kind of hoping like through osmosis it'll feel good. So we'll open up and I'll read out loud whatever the poem of the day is. And
I
so
love that.
yeah, I've been really enjoying that.
Thanks.
Oh, all right, let's see. What is something that you feel pressured to achieve by your 30s?
Okay. So I think a lot of people can relate to this, or just the people that I'm around that I'm talking to about, but really either settling down in a marriage or having kids. That is something. I grew up in a very small town, suburb town. I'm back in it now. And it is something that I feel pressure when people ask me, "Oh, you're single? Have you met anyone? Are you on the apps?" I do feel a lot of pressure to the point sometimes I have lied and said that I do have a boyfriend. And I'm like, why did I do that? I don't. But just being honest on here, that is something that I still do feel pressure. It's something I'm working actively with my therapist on, and just really trusting that there is an ample amount of time. And just because my love life looks a little different than the people around me, that's okay. And we're all on our perfect timeline. So that is something that I'm actively working on, and I do feel pressure with for sure.
Thank you for sharing
Of,
that. And
of course.
okay, so I'm thinking as we're bumping up on time,
Yes.
are there any on your list that could kind of be more like a rapid fire kind of question?
Um, I have one that I really, really want to ask you.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
not
let's
rapid
do one
fire,
more.
so maybe I'll
Yeah,
make
tell
that
me.
my last one. Okay.
Yeah, let's do one more each. And then I have a couple just kind of silly rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, perfect. What does being beautiful mean to you as you get older?
I think being beautiful is happiness,
Mm,
being fulfilled, and also being authentic.
I
And
love
so I
that.
think that like the most like beautiful people that I know are like they're just authentic in who they are. They are happy, but not in like content is a better word. They're like content in their existence and they're authentic in who they are. And like they show up as they are and they allow others to show up as they are as well. And that's something that I think is just incredibly beautiful. And that's something that, you know, even if our body suits are aging, I think that's something that hopefully we only get better with as we age is getting to know ourselves better and being content with who we are and also, being a space of open arms for how, others are and letting them show up as they are as well and really like seeing people.
I love that. Thank you. That's
Yes.
beautiful.
Okay. The last question that I really wanted to ask you. There's so many. Maybe this is something, guys, if you're enjoying this, let us know. We could always like take this on like an Instagram live or something.
Yes,
Like just
that'd
keep
be so
asking questions
fun.
because I know we had so many. Who in the world makes you feel like you can be yourself the most?
I mean, I feel like this is such a like funny answer, but probably my therapist. I mean, I have said some crazy stuff, I feel like, and she has not batted an eye and has made me feel like, I mean, I know she's getting paid to be there, but she is so good at her job because I feel like when I go in there and I bring up something that has brought me so much guilt or shame throughout the years, and I just say it to her, and we have that short 50-minute window, I leave feeling like, wow, like, it's okay. Like I'm okay. I'm not a bad person. I'm lovable. Like I'm still like I'm human. And so I feel like she's shout out to Courtney. She's amazing.
Yes, Courtney, we love it. Okay, a
Yes.
couple of rapid fire questions that I had on my list. Are you currently, as someone who lived through Y2K, are you currently doing any Y2K fashion trends? Yes or no?
No.
Um, as someone whose last first date was in 2009, when was your last first date?
Oh my gosh. Probably like February when I was seeing this guy. Yeah,
The
that was
one
my
that I
last.
know about?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Okay.
yeah.
Let's see. Are you feeling nervous about being 29? So your last year of your 20s?
Yes and no. That was going to be actually my last question. I heard it's better in your 30s. Is it true? And I have to say, being in my later 20s, it's been amazing. It only gets better as you get older. So yes.
Yes, I think of my 20s. You didn't ask me this question, but I'm going to answer it.
Yes,
I
please.
think in your 20s, I feel like I did my 20s was for doing and my
Mhm.
30s is for being and like evolving.
Yes.
Like being and expanding where like my 20s was all about like doing and different experiences, saying yes to everything. Where now it's just like, yeah, your 20s are about doing and learning, and your 30s are kind of more about like being and settling into who you really are, in my opinion.
Yes.
Oh my
Love that.
gosh. Okay, well, as we wrap up here, I want to hear about Eddie. So tell us where we can connect with you, Ariana, because you truly are just like the most amazing person. I want to hear all about Eddie because not only have I heard amazing, amazing things. You guys, Ariana sent me this like beautiful like care package of Eddie. I haven't been able to try her signature product yet because it has a non-breast. You can't use it if you're breastfeeding because there's a retinol in it.
Mhm.
However, I have gifted it to so many people and I only hear the most amazing things. And so tell us everything about Eddie because I'm so obsessed with just your product, your brand, you following your dream. It's been so special to be able to see you building it from like truly it being a dream when we met years ago when Pork Chop was little and you were like, one day I want to have my own skincare line to like now we're having this conversation and you have your own skincare line and getting to see that evolution in real time has been so amazing. So tell everyone everything.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm honored. So thank you again. I'm so excited to talk about Eddie, but it is my own skincare line. We are one product strong. And it is my intention to really just keep honing on this one product. I don't foresee more products coming. It is a retinol, and I'm so excited about it because it's formulated a little bit differently than your traditional retinol. It's formulated with something called vitamin A palmitite, and it has a time release technology. So it doesn't work as soon as it touches the skin. It actually waits till it's down in the dermis and then it gets to work. And so you want to think about it being wrapped in bubble wrap and then only unwrapping when it's in a safe place to get to work. And by it bypassing the surface, you're bypassing irritation, redness, flakiness. So you won't really have that experience with this, which I'm so excited about. And the reason why I started with the retinol product was because I felt like there was no one that I was talking to that was in love with what they were using. And I felt like everybody can be convinced to try something else. And I really wanted to come into the space and create something so great and create a loyal community to where almost they can pass this down for generations. So that was my goal behind it. And yeah, it's the love of my life. I love it so much. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest at Eddie Skin. So it's Eddie_skin. Website is www.eddieskin.com. Feel free to DM me, email me. You can email me at Ariana at eddieskin.com. And it's my favorite thing in the world, getting to connect with all of you and talking about skincare. And yeah, I'm so excited. Like Kelly said, you can't use it if you're breastfeeding. We really don't recommend using vitamin A. It's not because it's super dangerous, but it's just, you always want to be cautious, especially when you're growing a beautiful, healthy baby in your womb and you're breastfeeding. We don't want anything to Yes.
Contraindication.
Maybe?
We don't want it. We
Yeah,
don't
we don't
want it.
want it.
We don't, when we're pregnant and breastfeeding, we just, we leave the retinols to the side. But I will
Yes.
say, everyone that I have gifted Eddie to loves it. So, like, I am not just saying this because you're here in front of me. Like, everyone loves it. It's also beautiful. And
Oh,
I don't know,
thank
just
you.
go, and if you are a skincare girly or you want to dabble, I will say the thing that people really highlight is that they do not get irritated with it. That's what everyone tells me. So I'm dying to try it. And it's going to be like the first thing that I try once I'm able to do so. And Ariana was so kind, and she is going to give Mindful Minutes listeners 20% off if anyone wants to try it. I think code MIM20.
Yes, MIM20. Yeah, you'll be able to put that into the checkout on the website and we'll have that shipped out to you right away.
And I'm going to link everything in the show notes. So go support not only a beautiful woman, but also an incredible product that is built by a fellow female solopreneur chasing her dream, and also a member of our Mindful in Minutes community. So, Ariana, thank you so much for being here. It's always so good to catch up with you. And I'm so grateful for you giving me your time and sharing your thoughts and answering your questions so honestly and thoughtfully. And yeah, if you guys want to hear more from us, let us know, because we're always up for chatting. So
Yeah.
we can keep answering questions elsewhere because, we just love to chat. But yeah, anything else to add?
Thank you so much. I literally enjoyed this so much. Like, I'm going to echo what you said. If anybody wants a second part, this is so nice because I get to spend time with you.
I know, it gives us an excuse to catch
Selfishly.
up.
But thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to DM me, email me, all the things. I would love to connect with you.
Yes, and Ariana is just such a sweet person and an open ear. And I know that she would be happy to answer your questions, as would I too, whether it's about loneliness, friendship, our experiences on that, following a dream, the true like ups and downs of entrepreneurship. So yeah. So thank you everyone for being here, and I hope you have a beautiful day.
Thank you. You as well.